Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Daily Racing Forum YouTube. I'm Gino Buccola alongside David Aragona with producer Lucia helping us out. So we head on over to Canterbury Park to take a look at one of the big races of the meet over there. David, I always love mentioning when we talk about Canterbury, the low takeout that they have. That's one of the real perks of playing the races over there. I think this is going to be race 6, the Canterbury Derby on Saturday. So this would be the end of that early pick 5, starts in race 2, and that's a 10% low takeout. As horse players, we can always be excited when we can get more of our money back playing the races. What do you think about the field lining up here for the Canterbury Derby this year?
I thought this was actually a pretty competitive race. Horses that I'm not necessarily familiar with, not following the Canterbury circuit day in and day out, but there are plenty of horses coming in from different tracks that have interesting form, plenty of horses that seem like they really moved up on the turf, and a lot that haven't really faced each other before. So, going to be interesting to see how they stack up against each other.
As we move to the Timeform US Pace Projector, I think you really hit it. What's tricky for me handicapping a track like Canterbury is you have horses coming from so many different places, right? I think 2 in here last raced at Canterbury, a couple more last race at Prairie Meadows. You have one that was over at Turf Paradise, another at Indiana Grand, and another at Lone Star. So you're getting horses from all over the place in different circuits here. I'm not surprised to see Homie up close early on. This is a horse who showed speed in both starts, David, was not far off a sub 22 early quarter mile in that career debut. And this horse is fresh, so probably will be showing a little bit of speed off the bench.
Yeah, I think the pace projector's got it pretty much right here. Homie has shown speed in both prior starts. He's likely to go to the front coming off the layoff here. Sushi Man also has plenty of speed. He did go gate to wire in his only prior turf start, but with him being drawn outside of Homie, you'd imagine they'd be content to set up shop outside of that foe.
Let's meet the field for the Canterbury Derby. They'll be going 1 mile on the turf course, and we kick things off with R&R Audible. So he comes off of a good effort. He was a winner on June the 8th at Canterbury. He had a fine start. He was sitting 2 or 3 lengths off. He was asked for run. He responded. He made a nice 4-wide move down the center of the lane, separated, thought everything was good. But the concern is both of his victories are sprinting on the dirt, 4.5 and 5.5 furlongs. This is long on the turf, and we only have one race where he went long on the turf, David. So we don't really have a good gauge for what he may be like on the grass. That's why he's a little bit of a tricky read for me.
Yeah, he's also a horse that ran his career best buyer on debut and has never really gotten back to it since July of his 2-year-old season. So you wonder if there's really been any progression since then. He's got that one prior turf route, and he was not competitive in that race. The winner entered a dragon. He's okay. He'd be a contender in a race like this. This horse actually has turf pedigree, Gina, when you look up the dam side. I mean, he's a half to a 5-time turf winner. There are 4 turf winners in the family, but he has not yet shown that affinity himself.
Another horse who actually has a decent little turf pedigree would be the 2 Smokin' Boy, whose dam tried turf twice, won a starter allowance at Aqueducts, going 6 furlongs. His best races have been in the slop. He's another tricky read because he was very good early in the career and on muddy tracks. And then they tried some very ambitious spots, some really tough spots for him, and he just seemed overmatched. When he got a level that seemed a little bit better for him, a more competitive level, he was able to get the job done in a stakes race that was taken off the turf, but it was just a small field at Indiana Grand. So he's a tricky read again, David, and that's what makes this race really fun to handicap. But I will say he's probably one of the horses who comes out of some of the best races overall. So from a class standpoint, this feels like it should be relief for him if he can maybe transfer the form to the turf.
Yeah, I think the connections got maybe a little bit fooled by those visually impressive wins down in Puerto Rico, where he really wasn't beating much, and they just placed him in some ambitious spots when he first got here. He does have that 85 buyer in the slop at Horseshoe Indy 2 back that would make him really tough here if he can transfer that to the turf. Now, there is some turf pedigree. His dam was a turf winner. Actually, I think her win earns an 84 buyer, so she had some turf quality. And what I noticed looking through this horse's form, Gino, is all of the good dirt races are on wet tracks. Obviously, a sealed wet track at Horseshoe Indy. And when you watch some of those races, down in Puerto Rico and South America, those off tracks generally are sealed or they're packed down. And sometimes horses that have more turf inclination handle that type of going. So we'll see if he actually can handle the turf. I just don't want a horse that's going to get bet off strong speed figures on the dirt in this situation.
Seahorse Stampede is the number 3. He tried the dirt last time out, just didn't really fire on it. But if you can excuse that race, you just put a line through the dirt race. You go back to his 3 starts on the turf. They're all pretty solid, David. I think you sort of know what you're going to get from him. He's a deeper closer. He doesn't have a whole lot of early speed. He's going to sit back. He's going to make one late run. He will hope that the outside horses, maybe Homie, Canyon Streak, Sushi Man, all push each other a little bit. And if this pace heats up, this will be one of the horses that will probably try to take advantage.
He's definitely a strong finisher. I'm not quite sure what he's been facing down at Turf Paradise, so he's going to get a real class test here. But you can see when you watch all of his turf races, he's got this big, long stride on him. He's a relentless finisher. I will say, if you're looking at the PPs in the Racing Form or Time Form US, and you're just looking at the chart of that last turf race, no, he didn't make up 9 lengths in the final eighth. I don't know what the chart caller was looking at for that stretch call, but he still was coming at the end, and I think he's going to be finishing here if any pace develops.
The horse who was behind him, not too far behind him on April the 29th at Turf Paradise, is Ben and Donner, who was really right on the wire. Both of them came closing. And as you said, it's just tough to get a read on that form at Turf Paradise, how it's going to stack up. Sometimes you'll get horses from Southern California that'll sneak out there and maybe it'll make those races a little bit tougher. But it's really kind of on a case by case situation. I preferred Seahorse Stampede over Ben and Donner. I just thought he had a little bit better form overall, and I think maybe a little stronger of the closer. Which did you think was the better horse to maybe take out of the Turf Paradise races?
I agree with you that Seahorse Stampede is a little easier to make a case for. Ben and Donner, I actually liked his race 2-back more so than his most recent one because he got studied at the start 2-back and actually did well to nearly win that race. But I thought he had every chance last time, and Seahorse Stampede just kind of ran right by him at the end.
We move on to Homie, who is 2 for 2, and he's trained by Larry Ravelli, who is certainly capable to get horses ready off the layoff, and that's what he'll have to do with Homie, because Homie has not raced since September the 23rd at Indiana Grand. Both of his races over at Horseshoe Indy were very solid, David, and he was forwardly placed in both of them. He sat second in the debut. He was on the lead. He basically battled on the inside of a 45-1 shot here, and he got the job done as the favorite. So I have no problem with his races. You can see his buyers are a little bit light. Remember, that's kind of earlier on in the 2-year-old season too, so they're not quite as strong. What do you think about Homie's chances in here off the bench?
Yeah, he's one of the tougher horses to read in this race for a few reasons. I mean, obviously, he wasn't beating much of the field last time. We looked at that replay, and the horse that was fending off at 45-1, I think he's got a lot of buyers in the 40s and 50s. So there was a reason why Homie was 4-5 in that race. And I just wanted to see him win that a little bit more convincingly. Also, he's a horse that was bred and owned by Wesley Ward for his career debut. You kind of wonder why Wesley shed himself of this horse and how much he actually sold for to the new connections, and he hasn't been able to stay on the racetrack since then, so that's always a concern. Just kind of wonder what we're going to get from this horse.
Canyon Streak gets interesting. I mean, just off of speed figures, he coming into this race off of good efforts over in Texas at Lone Star and at Sam Houston. He's a multiple winner, which is also a positive. And running style wise, David, he feels like he could get a pretty good trip because he has that running style where he doesn't need the lead, but he can sit just a couple lengths off and within striking range of the leaders. So feel like he's going to get a good trip. Just not really sure how good the races are, the Texas bred races are that he's coming out of, because that's really all he's faced in his career is Texas breds.
It's really tough to read as you go from one circuit to the next to determine who's coming out of the toughest races. I like to go in the Time Form USPPs and look at the race ratings on the left-hand side of the past performances, which assign class ratings to each of the horse's prior races. I think that's a really great metric to use when you're comparing class from one circuit to another. And those would suggest that Canyon Streak is actually the horse that's coming out of some of the toughest races of anybody in here. And I'll note that when you look back at his prior turf races, and we just watched the replay of the most recent one on April 17th, he actually has faced older horses in all 3 prior turf starts. And you look up some of those fields in Formulator, the horse that beat him in that race we took a look at, Silver Assassin, he's a horse that's run turf buyers in the upper 70s. So this horse has held his own against some legitimate foes. And I think he's actually maybe stepping into a softer field here.
You have a horse who comes out of races against Texas breds, and then another who's coming out of races against Minnesota breds. That's Sushi Man, who got to the lead, cleared the field, and really was able to crush. And that was his first start on the turf on June the 11th right here at Canterbury. We were able to watch. So this horse will wheel back pretty quickly off of that impressive effort. And remember, that was against Minnesota breds. He's now facing Open Company. Did have a fine second against Open Company on the dirt at Prairie Meadows 2 starts back. So he feels like he's a kind of a top contender, at least with big speed on the outside.
Yeah, you don't often see turf races play out like this, where not only does he win by 7 lengths, but there's another 7 length gap after the runner up back to the rest of the field. So, some huge margins between him and the rest of the group. So, he was utterly dominant in that race and just seemed like a horse that not only has been improving with every start, but really did take a step forward on the turf. And you could tell right from the time they broke from the starting gate in that race, he was just loving the new surface, just had that high striding action over it. And no surprise that he would handle the turf being by a stern out of an invincible spirit mare, just turf pedigree through and through with this horse. He's just one, Gino, that's getting a huge class test because he really was beating nothing last time.
There's your field for the Canterbury Derby this year. Now let's move to selections for this one. David, how are you going to stack them up in race 6 on Saturday at Canterbury?
Yeah, I was really taken with that visually impressive replay from Sushi Man. Didn't ultimately want to pull the trigger on a horse that's taking such a class hike, though. And I just think Canyon Streak faced some legitimate foes down in Texas, and he was consistent through all three turf races. And I think if he brings that form here, he's going to be a handful.
6-7-3-2 for David, 3-7-2-6 for me. So the same four horses we just have in slightly different order. I'm going to put Seahorse Stampede on top. I could see there being versions of this race where Sushi Man, Homie go pretty quick early
Yeah.
on. Maybe Canyon Streak from the outside is a little bit close early. And even a couple of the horses down on the inside, I wouldn't be shocked if they try to get aggressive, get these horses into the race. And maybe there were only one or two that were really going to drop back and that could get the setup. Might be Seahorse Stampede. So however you play them on Saturday at Canterbury, we wish you the best of luck.